Today, we're going to be talking about definitions of disability. And there's three topics that I'm going to be discussing with Neil, who is the editor-producer for PWD Allies. Number one is definitions, synonyms versus antonyms. Number two, disability, social versus medical model. And number three will be persons first versus identity first language. Stay tuned as we'll be talking about that next. Do you have a disability? Follow along.
The reason we're doing this podcast today is I kind of wanted to do a little bit of what do you want to call it, a prerequisite.
Hmm.
You've heard about when they talk about prerequisite courses in college and university that
Yeah.
you have to take English 101 before 201 and 301 and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And we're going to be having Tamara Taggart on Friday's show.
Hmm.
And we're going to be talking about disability a lot on that show, and how kind of discrimination happens, or how you know people with disabilities can be seen as less than, or kind of open for mistreatment, like it's not a big deal.
Hmm.
We're kind of going to get into that discussion. But before we kind of go into that discussion on Friday, we kind of have to set the stage for how disability is actually defined. And we can start with I know, like, we could go down one road where, for example, like people in BC here, and I think most people in Canada, of course, know who Rick Hansen is.
Hmm.
He was the man in motion. He did the round the world tour in his wheelchair, and he came up with the term physically challenged. you
Hmm.
know um instead of saying physically handicapped, it was physically challenged, right? And then you have, it was kind of the more politically correct term or something. And then you have other terms like differently abled, and as
Yeah,
a way.
I've heard
and
that
and,
before.
and I mean, we're not really going to touch on that. I like um I know that Rick Hansen himself now has walked back from all that kind of pretty language now. Like, he realizes, he shouldn't have recreated what disability was by saying physically challenged, because that doesn't really define anything, right? If you say physically challenged or differently abled, you're not really defining anything. It's
Exactly.
it's far better to actually stick with the word disabled
Yeah.
or disability, and actually just define that, like, to just be real and true, and say this is what disabled is, this is what disability is. So this is what this show is going to be about. We're going to start at the basics.
Hmm.
um and you know when you think of definitions, where do you go to find definitions, Brent?
Go to Wikipedia.
Wikipedia, yeah, or any dictionary, right?
Yep.
You'd go to any dictionary, and I mean, I know, like, when I was a kid, and I'm sure when you were a
Mhm.
kid, uh, like, I had a set of encyclopedias.
Oh, yeah.
That was that was before Google, of course. Like, now people go to Google for everything. It's like
Yeah.
that's the definitive source. But before, if you wanted to find the truth of something, you would go to either an encyclopedia set, or you'd go to,
I
you
go to
know,
the
you,
library or.
yeah, you would go to the library, or you'd find a dictionary and look up in your web search dictionary, what's the definition of this.
Mhm.
So this is what we're going to do today. We're going to start with the basics and actually go to dictionaries. We're going to go to the online dictionary of Webster
Mhm.
and dictionary.com, and look at how uh, the actual dictionaries define what disability is. So
Hmm.
we're going to start with the basics, and I'm going to open up. a screen share here. Just give me a moment. We're going to do that now. So this is from the Cambridge Dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I could bring up Merriam-Webster dictionary too, but the words are basically the same. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of bring up the word cloud, if you want to call it word cloud. Everybody's kind of familiar with what word clouds are. They're basically when we talk about disability, it's like what words are related to disability or disabled, and it's like what are the synonyms or what are the related words that if you or replacement words. If you could replace a word with disability or disabled, what would those words be? And here we have a few. So here's the synonyms or the ones that are like words or similar words. Is the first one here is incapacitated.
Mm-hmm.
So if you talk about disabled or disability, incapacitated is one of the synonyms. Another one is impotent impotent for disabled
Mm-hmm.
or disability. Impotent.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then next, another one is infirm. Another one is weakened. Weakened. Another one is handicapped, and I'll get to that one in a second. Handicapped is another one. Maimed. Maimed is one. Wounded. Mangled. Challenged. Helpless. Unable. And here's my favorite one is wrecked.
Yeah.
Wrecked. So all these words are meant to be replacements for the word disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Now those aren't very flattering terms, are they? Like
Yep.
none of those terms are very flattering. Now, if we scroll down, I'm going to scroll down a second here. Bear with me. If we scroll down, then it's got the antonyms. You can see the antonyms here. And what antonyms are they the opposite? They are the opposite terms of disability. So the opposite of disability is able-bodied.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the opposite of able-bodied, it means you're not able, right?
Yeah.
And then it's saying the antonym of disabled is healthy. So again, the assumption is that if you're disabled, you're not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of disabled is strong. So again, if you took the opposite of that means you're weak and you're not strong. The antonym of disabled is fit, which means that if you're disabled, you're unfit. The opposite of disabled is robust, which means the opposite of that means you're not robust, right? So it's
Yep.
we're creating a very negative we're creating a very negative picture
Mm-hmm.
of what disability is, and the whole reason why I'm going down this road, and we'll go back to full screen. I just wanted to bring this up though. The whole reason why we're doing this show is to say that you have like decades and decades of very academia, if you want to call it like academia, like smart people, like people that make dictionaries,
Yeah.
like Merriam-Webster, that are propagating this idea that if you're disabled, you're weak, you're impotent, you're wrecked. To have a disability means you're wrecked. But if everybody goes to dictionary.com or Webster's dictionary, all these kind of words are going to be the same. And I can actually bring up a whole other uh, list of words from other sites. Like some of the other words were limited, restricted, powerless, damaged, disordered or disorder, incapable, decrepit, uh, invalid or invalid,
Yeah.
detriment, and here's one, disqualification. And again, this is for disabled or disability, disqualification, defect,
Oh, yeah.
lack, lack, fault, inadequacy, or another great one is liability. So,
Jeez.
so, so look at all the negative terms
Lots of negative terms.
around disability, right? there's not one positive word there to
Hmm.
describe disabled or disability. If disability is founded is built upon a negative lens or
Hmm.
a negative stigma, like all those terms that we just read were
Yeah.
all negative. So if it's all negative already,
Hmm.
like all these policies from government or from employers, it's going to have the negative spin on it already
Yeah, exactly. Because
because
they
our own dictionaries tell us that,
face
if you're
negative policy.
disabled, it's all like, you're impotent, you're an invalid, you're invalid, you
Hmm.
know. And I just wanted to switch over and we'll talk about the medical model versus the social model of disability, and say why those two things are important too. I think most people that are disabled have heard that term before, or those terms of the social model versus the medical model.
Probably the medical model, I think a lot of people would be probably even more familiar with because medical versus like they'll think social model, they'll think social safety net or uh, and I look at the medical model because a medical model is when a person is medically assessed and designated as a person with disability by their practitioner. They have to go through a lot of different
Hmm.
testing to make sure that that they can get onto like a social safety net where
Hmm.
onto a pension and to make sure that they are, that's why they call it social safety net, because to make sure that they're well taken care of in today's society. But again, policies are embedded way back into like decades and decades and decades ago, where you're right, Neil. It was, I guess, socially okay for governments to look at the negative part and say, well, this is equals this, so let's make negative policies. So let's
Yeah.
let's change a pension into a non-pension.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because the negative already exists.
yeah,
They're already saying if you're disabled, you're not worthy. You're
yeah.
not worthy of a pension. So we'll just take it away. If you're not worthy of something, if you're decrepit and if you're wrecked already, or if you're an invalid already, why should you be deserving of a pension? Or why should you be deserving of any support at all? And so to um to go back to the medical model versus social model, I just want to restate it. The medical model is when you say that, for example, like I have crutches. I used to have crutches. I can't use crutches anymore because of my injury. But so now I'm in a wheelchair. So the medical model would say that Neil can't use stairs. Neil can't use stairs because he's in a wheelchair. That's the medical model.
Mhm.
Or the medical model for you would be, there's no point in Brent going to a movie. There's no point in Brent going to a movie because he can't see anyway.
Mhm.
Kind of, that's because so the medical model is saying that you're incapable because of your disability makes you incapable of functioning. So there's certain things that you just can't do. Like they're saying, I can't do stairs and you can't watch movies. So that's part of the medical model, is that the medical model disqualifies you based on your condition. It says,
Yeah.
because you have this condition, we're assuming that you can't do something. Whereas the social model says, well, the only thing that's limiting you is the social construct of, you know, if you had an elevator,
Mhm.
Neil, you wouldn't need the stairs. You could just take an elevator, and that's fine. Or, and in your case, we could say if you had just more powerful glasses,
Yeah.
you could go to a movie, no problem. And this
Mhm.
is where I wanted to also dive into. You have person first language
Yeah.
versus identity first language, and it's important to see how the person first language and identity first language ties into the medical model
Yeah.
versus the social, because they're all it's all connected, right?
Oh, yeah.
and that's why we're devoting a whole show to this because everything's connected.
It's like a
So
puzzle, everyone. It's
so
all.
so now if we talk about person first language, and person first language is when you say person with a disability. So our podcast is called PWD Allies. So we're following the person first we're following the person first language
Yeah.
of person with a disability. Um, if you wanted to do identity first, it would be disabled person. So
Yeah.
you're putting the disability first. You're saying it's important to recognize the disability first and say, like I'm a disabled person, you're a disabled person, Brent. So we're putting onus or we're putting emphasis on the actual disability first and
Mhm.
saying that's the important bit,
Mhm.
right? Um, and I think that's important because um, when you like there's positives and negatives to both of like there's positive and negatives to the medical model versus social model. There's positive and negatives to the person first versus identity first, and I can get into that.
Mhm.
If you focus only on person first language, you're like I kind of alluded to, you're
Yeah.
minimizing how important or impactful the disability is. Like you're almost saying, you're attaching the disability to the person and
Mhm.
saying, well, it's your identity, it's kind of your fault, it's
Yeah.
nobody else's fault, you own it.
Mhm.
You're the person with the disability, so you own it. That's your identity. But then if you take it the other way and say, I'm a disabled person, if you take that tact, then you're almost saying like, I'm a disabled person, disabled by what or by whom?
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I
The
mean?
other
Like
way
you're
around. Yeah.
like you're putting the emphasis on the disability. You're saying I'm disabled by what or by whom?
Mhm.
You see, so there's positive and negatives to both to
Yeah.
saying both. Like I know in like I said in academia and in government or and in professional circles, we can say in professional circles, the traditional method is to always use person first language.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because if you look at like PWD, right? Persons with disabilities or disabilities with person. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So it's like the
yeah,
other.
doesn't really make
No,
sense, right?
no, it doesn't.
Um, yeah, so I mean, you can understand why the person first language was adopted because
Mhm.
it's meant to kind of respect the person, respect the autonomy, but in a sense, it in some ways it does the opposite
Yeah.
because
The
like
situation.
like
Yeah.
some people have said that if you don't say, for example, if you don't say disabled person,
Hmm.
if you don't say it the other way and say disabled person, you're not acknowledging the community of
Hmm.
disability because you're just kind of attaching it to your individualism, and
Hmm.
you're not acknowledging the whole community of disability. But if you say disabled person, then you're kind of acknowledging the whole community of disability. But if you just say I'm a person with disability, you're kind of just saying it's all about me, my identity, and
Yeah.
I own it, and it's nobody else's responsibility. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I remember when I went to the train station and had to check in, check in luggage, and right away they said, "Oh, okay, so here's the disabled person and the disabled person's companion." So right away they said, "Here's the disabled person," and
Mhm.
that's how they identified me. There is here's the oh,
Which
hi
which
Brent.
which
Yeah.
actually, to me it makes more sense because you're not, like when you say disabled person, you're not hiding the truth.
Hmm.
Like you're saying you're putting the emphasis on the disability, which makes sense, right? You
Hmm.
should be putting the emphasis on the disability, saying like, because having a disability kind of sucks. It's it's a significant thing. It's not an insignificant thing, right? So
Well, I
it,
mean, you notice how the industry, in general, they'll say the most vulnerable.
yeah,
They won't. They say the persons with a person with disabilities in general. Like it's just in general. Like I mean, I maybe that's just my view on how I'm seeing things, but I just lately I've been hearing on like media they'll say the most vulnerable, the most vulnerable.
yeah.
Why? Like is it like a like an overview rather than focusing on certain um I guess not classifications, but they'll say, well, there's disabled people, there's seniors, there's the middle class, there's the
Mhm.
well-to-do, you know what I mean, or there's low income, and I don't know. It's just I think maybe that's just how society has kind of over time have kind of evolved of looking at it as they don't know how to deal with the most vulnerable in
Yeah.
society. I don't know, like.
And I've mentioned this before too, and it is all related. I mean,
Well, I mean, how government deals with it, that is.
people can disagree with what I'm about to say, and that's fine. But I'll make the point that I mean I've said it before. I don't like I don't like DEI. I don't like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I
Mhm.
mean, on paper, I love the idea. Like, who doesn't like the idea of diversity? Who doesn't like the idea of equity? Who doesn't like the idea of inclusion? Of course, we all like that idea, right?
Mhm.
But when you have DEI, where DEI that doesn't actually mean what it says or what it imports to mean, when it's kind of this whole big lie. I
Mhm.
mean, if it actually meant what it said,
Mhm.
if it actually meant what it said, I support it. But the problem with that is it doesn't actually mean what it says. The problem that I have with DEI is that it actually creates more discrimination. I've said that before. I mean, you're making smaller and smaller boxes for people.
Mhm.
You're like, for example, I've said before with my clawback,
Right.
where the government can say, well, if you only had stayed just disabled, if you only had stayed just disabled, we would support you up to the maximum dollar amount of disability support if you only had stayed just disabled. But because
Mhm.
you've checked another box of diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mhm.
of being a widower now, because you've checked the other box of that, smaller and smaller boxes of everybody, right? The smaller the box, the
Yeah.
more we're going to come down on you with a hammer,
Yeah.
right? That's how DEI is set now. So because in my case, because I'm a widower, they're gonna claw back. They're gonna actually punish me because I fit a smaller and smaller box. And
Mhm.
and to me, that's what I see. I see more examples of DEI functioning that way. Unfortunately, again, the way they use DEI is, well, they're saying, well, the fact that your pension, your survivor's pension, proves that you need more support. The fact that proves that you need more support, we're gonna claw that back because you've now proven that you need more support. So we're actually gonna claw that off you now. You see how
Yeah.
backwards that is?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Just,
what I mean about backwards DEI.
yeah.
The DEI does the opposite. It's the opposite DEI now. It's like, how far can we discriminate? How far can we discriminate and target and be biased and prejudiced? Like, it's all about piling on the prejudice and piling on the discrimination and like getting people in smaller and smaller boxes to further and further discriminate.
Yep.
That's the truth of it, right? That's the truth of it.
Oh, absolutely. And again, this all stems, everyone. It stems from policies, bad policy decisions that were made decades and decades ago.
I wanted to make a quick, like maybe 5 minute comment, or hopefully less actually. Again, the reason why
So
we're
much is
doing
on.
why we're doing today's show is I wanted to show how all of this baggage of what disability is, or how disability is actually defined, how all that baggage translates into discrimination, whether it's intended or not intended,
Hmm.
how things are defined rightly and wrongly,
Hmm.
how it directly impacts uh, discrimination. Because and I don't know how often I've shared this on the podcast, but I tried to become a elementary school teacher. Like I went to university and I finished it. I got my degree in a Bachelor of Arts eventually. Like I did finish a degree, but that wasn't my original intent. My original intent was to become a school teacher for elementary. That's what I wanted to do. So I went into teaching
Hmm.
for that. And so this is back when I was about 25. So we're going back like 32 years.
Hmm.
32 years we're going back that I decided to do this. So I went to UBC, and I went into the teachers program, the student teachers program, and I got through the first year and a half okay. They did the first practicum. It was a shorter practicum. I got through that fine. I
Yeah.
got through all my courses fine, no problems at all. And then we got to the last practicum, and that is where I experienced, for the first time in my life, honest to goodness discrimination. And again, I won't go into like a whole
Yeah.
bunch of detail. I'll just say that it was very obvious. Like, for example, I had the teacher that I was learning from,
Hmm.
the classroom teacher. She was supposed to be my mentor. Um, she would, and actually also the faculty advisor from UBC. You have faculty advisors from UBC that they team up with the teachers. So there's two of
Hmm.
them that are giving you advice on how you should properly teach and stuff like that, right? They're grading you on your performance basically the
Oh,
whole
okay.
the whole time.
Interesting.
And so they would say things like you should really have better posture in front of the class, Neil. Your bent legs are the kids are getting what's the word, they're getting uncomfortable. They're getting uncomfortable with your bent legs, Neil.
I've
and
heard.
and and like they would just say that to me like right up front. Like they didn't even try to say it like to hide it.
Yeah,
It
they
was
just
like
came out and said,
it's like your
"Wow,
bent legs are a problem.
oh man,
And it's like, well, I'm sorry, I can't control
you
my
can't
bent legs.
you can't change who you are."
Yeah, I can't control my bent legs. And I would push back and say, well, I'm pretty sure the kids don't have a problem with my bent legs, but it sure sounds like you have a problem with my bent legs. But
Yeah,
but 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 I couldn't be that direct with them. I
right.
didn't I didn't actually come out and say it like that
No, no,
that strongly, because if I did, I'd be
yeah,
shown the
but
door kind of
but
thing,
you
right?
you wanted to,
I wanted to say that. I
yeah,
wanted to
yeah,
say that.
exactly.
But I knew that the kids didn't have a problem with my bent legs. It was those teachers, the two teachers, that had a problem with my bent legs. And also too, like, my cerebral palsy meant that I have really messy writing. So for example, one of the things I really wanted to do was I wanted to get another student that
Mhm.
had better writing to come up and help me write on the blackboard. And both of them said, you
Sounds good.
can't do that, Neil. You can't do
Oh,
that. If you can't write on the blackboard, you shouldn't be a teacher. Like
oh
they
my
they
gosh,
would just blatantly
terrible.
say that kind of thing too, right?
Wow.
So it goes back to those definitions again of like there's 30 years or more of this baggage
Hmm.
where whether it's the school system, whether it's employers, whether it's the government, they kind of have this feeling of entitlement that it's like, well, if you're disabled, you don't really deserve that. We're entitled to be discriminatory towards you.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, and they won't say that. They won't actually say that, because if you say that, then it's like, you know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't say we're openly being discriminatory.